producing dApps that generate data about their use. And the data the dApps are producing is of greater economic value than the cost of the trainers themselves. So Nike are thinking about giving away free dApps because of the data it generates. And similarly, we all have the potential to access and generate data that is of value. Now, we don't always know yet what that value is, and that's the odd phase we're in, I think. Clive will be telling you about some of the work going on in Cardigan, and it's throwing up intriguing bits of data, but we haven't fully figured out yet how to make the most of that data. But let's not the perfect be the enemy of the good. We don't have to wait for it all to be figured out. Let's crack on with doing something so we can start together to understand the value of it. So I remember reading a book several years ago on AI, and they said just put sensors everywhere. Sensorize everything, and then we'll learn as we go. And LoRaWAN is a relatively cheap technology that allows us to be able to get hold of this data and then together figure out what it tells us about consumer trends and what possibilities it opens up. And the final thing I will say, just to the whole ecosystem really, is that it's no good as just focusing on one bit of this pipeline. So the sensors are important, the LoRaWAN gateways are important, what we do with it is important. The whole thing is important. Let's not fixate on one bit. And through this network, and beyond it, we need to join that bits up. So we need to, as exciting for me, is not just the generation of the data, but it's then the interpretation and analysis of the data and the drawing out what for policy what that means. So for us to capture the real potential of this is, yes, let's crack on with putting sensors where we can, but also let's not lose the opportunity for Wales for using this resource that is so useful to Nike. It's useful for us too. So let's make sure we capture the whole value chain, not just one bit of it. So with that, I'll shut up and let everybody talk to you about how we can apply and practice. Let's keep talking and make this work. Diolch.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think our next speaker is very much the Nike of smart towns in Wales. So we have speakers from Cardigan, starting with Clive Davis, who is a county councillor and mayor of Cardigan. Clive is the man who puts smart into smart towns and makes the physical digital in Carmarthen. We will also hear firsthand from businesses in Cardigan. We have a lot of expertise around this virtual table today, but I don't think there's anything more compelling than hearing small businesses on the high street making use of big data. So Clive works with them on a daily basis, so he'll introduce them as part of his presentation. So on that, over to you, Clive.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Yes, so this afternoon's presentation is based around what we've done in Cardigan. Cardigan is a small town, population 4,500 people, and David's already mentioned a bit about myself, about what in terms of my role. If I can get this to move along, here we go. So yeah, town councillor. I was mayor in 2016, and I'm mayor of the town again this year. I'm also a county councillor, and I was made the digital champion for Cardigan County Council as well. And in the context of this presentation, I'm a member of the Town Centre Partnership, which is a forum that meets in Cardigan every quarter to look at projects and how we can develop and improve Cardigan Town as an offering for businesses and for the citizens and visitors of the town. And within that context then, there were two projects that we did back in 2016. One was the town Wi-Fi scheme, and one was the town app. And the analytics that came out of those two bits of information. So here's me in my last role back in 2016 as a young mayor, with one of the Wi-Fi access points that we installed across the town. And then the other image is the launch of the app as well in the town. So this was funded by European Union funding in two phases, where we did a feasibility and then we'd add the actual implementation then. So the data then that we get from these two bits of equipment systems is the people that come into the town, the passers-by. They have no interaction with the actual Wi-Fi scheme. They're just present in the town, basically. There's also people that use the Wi-Fi. They log in, browse, and take advantage of actually having free internet access in the town centre. And they have that option as well to opt into a newsletter, which I'll come back to. The app then gives you Google Analytics, some demographic information. So we encourage people to download the town app to inform them about all the different aspects of the town. Then also what we're looking at right now, future plans, and it was already mentioned earlier, LoRaWAN and the Internet of Things, whereby we hope as a town to have like a well-being dashboard to be able to sense different aspects of the town and to be able to, again, add to the information we can provide to the businesses and the townspeople, and to inform and to inform on policy as well. And all this information is anonymized and it's owned by the town council, and it's used basically for the benefit of the town. So going back to the Wi-Fi scheme, there's a sort of map of Cardigan, and those access points are located across Cardigan, and they act as one footprint for the whole town centre. So if you do happen to be in the town centre and you do need to access the Wi-Fi, you can look for something called Cardigan Town WiFi, and there it is, you can log in. As I said, you don't have to log in for us to be able to gather the data, and it's through this scheme then you'll be able to put your name in. There's a certain terms and conditions, GDPR, etc., and you can opt into a newsletter if you have to. Then the app I mentioned, here's one of the promotional bits and pieces we have for the app. It's available on 2 different platforms, Apple or Android, available in 2 languages, Cymraeg and in English. And it provides a sort of wide range of bits of information about the town, the shops, what's on offer, heritage, guided tours, 3D, so 360-degree images, very clever stuff, history. You can learn everything you need to know about Cardigan from this app that you have as well. But behind the scenes, just like with Wi-Fi, there's information being gathered for us to use then from the data that it's collecting. And then as part of the app, we've also installed 10, 12 beacons. They're called iBeacons across town. And these have different purposes. We don't have too many of them because that would be informing people too much. So some used for heritage, some used for the shopping. So an example up here, you got get to know the best beaches. Well, that's installed in one of the shops in Cardigan. And this one's installed near the castle. And so when you pass by, it pushes an information and a message to you to maybe entice you to go into the shop or entice you to look up more about the heritage. So it adds a sort of to the experience of the town. So the data we get out of it. So what do we get out of the analytics? We get traffic flow, footfall, how long people are staying, how often do they come, are they tourists, have they never been to Cardigan before, what days are busiest, quietest, what time of the day is busy or quiet, which part of the town gets busiest over the time, what kind of use is being made of the browsing and the Wi-Fi, and what kind of use in general people are making of the browsing facility as well. And this is an example of the dashboard that's on offer that we can be tailored to use that. From the app then, you get some demographics, USPs, you get a feel of what people think is popular about the town. Do they like certain eateries, do they like certain shops, do they like certain bits of history? And it also tells you where people are coming from away, what countries they're coming from, what kind of age groups people are that tend to visit, and what kind of interests they have. And this is all from the analytics behind the scenes then. And just to bring it up to the current day, historical comes into it as well with COVID. So we've got 2 years of history there, and the green one is 2020. As you can see, the dip here for tourists coming into town. Obviously, we're in lockdown, and then it shot back up, and we have almost recovered now at the end of September to what we normally would be in Cardigan in terms of numbers. Footfall in general then lower than average. And of course, shielding existed in August, so the general footfall was lower anyway in August. And people are avoiding the crowds because we had over summer 92,000 people coming to Cardigan to visit us, and so people were a bit wary of that. So for the future, this is one of the things we're looking at now: IoT, blending the information, which is going to be one of the other speakers are going to mention stuff, things like air quality, noise, the weather. These are factors that come into what influences people to visit towns like Cardigan, and also what decisions businesses make. And also turnover, that comes in as well. And as David mentioned, it's like a 360-degree picture of the town's health, a small town Fitbit, you could say. So this information then can be used for selling the town. So here's a tweet I did, and I mentioned a number of people visiting last year when the Eisteddfod came along. And we had a huge number of people come into town to see the Eisteddfod. Unfortunately, of course, it's been cancelled for this year and moved on to next year. But that helps market and inform. We also had events like our Lantern Parade every year. And again, it was part of the press release, the number of visitors, how many people came for the first time visiting Cardigan over Christmas. And so it's good selling point there as well. And also last year we had the other voices, and the data that we had from our system also helped a key point of actually being able to justify the funding and to get the KPIs to justify the funding to have this event happen in Cardigan. The newsletter I mentioned when you opt into goes out to about 2,000 people. It has all sorts of information in it. So people get offers, what events are coming up. And the good thing is, it's been going out every quarter. Very few people opt out. So it means that the value of the information is worth it because they're not opting out. So they actually value what comes through. So the one going out now between now and Christmas, promoting buy local and online shops that have now developed as a result of COVID. Some of the independents in Cardigan have now got their own shops online, so we'll entice them to buy online then as well. So this is just an image of some of the events that we have promoting on the newsletter, as I mentioned earlier. The other thing as well is to try and attract businesses. Now, what I've already mentioned is part of an overall offer. We've had in August 2 new shops open. We've got another 2 opening in October. New businesses coming into Cardigan. So businesses coming into Cardigan will get a report every month of the analytics. They can be part of the app. They'll be on the Visit Web Cardigan website on the directory. They can put some offers in onto the newsletter. They'll be on the map that goes out and gets circulated as well if they want to. That gets published every 2 or 3 years. Local authority have support for doing with planning and business rates and things like that. And also there's Business Wales. The 2 businesses that opened in August had support from Business Wales as well in terms of getting the business up and running. So this is an overall package and to entice businesses into the town as well. So in terms of what usage, the data goes out to about 120 people. They are journalists, they are local authority staff, they are town councillors, and also they are all the shops. Over 70 shops get this information every month. The kind of uses that gets done for understanding client visits, optimizing staff by time of day, analyze dwell time, how long people are staying in the town and how often do they come into the town. Comparing run A/B, so seeing whether free parking makes a difference, pedestrianising the town as we've had to do because of COVID, what effects that has. Analysing the data compared to other things like the weather and seeing whether the weather has an influence on the number of people that come into the town, how long they're staying. Fluctuations seasonally, when an event happens. Also, using the historical information, because we've been going for about 3 years now with this information. We have some historic pattern we can actually compare year on year. Also for looking at campaign evidence or funding evidence, we have data we can back stuff up and we measure footfall from. For example, I've got here for some projects that I was involved with the other voices, the skate park development. We could show what kind of numbers of people were using the skate park and the potential for the future in terms of use. The Lantern Parade, how many that attracted, and the carnival, etc. So basically, as I'm saying, it's good to have data help inform decisions rather than have opinionated people having a sort of guess, lots of opinions. But data actually can back up real decisions as well as part of all this. So as I said, information distributed. These are the examples of some reports that go out. I won't go through these too long, but basically these are the kind of things that go out to the 120 contacts that we have. And so coming to the final part of my presentation, here are some quotes from real businesses in Cardigan. You got Tom the butcher, who says the Wi-Fi is great for browsing. We got Crust here, we got Oshan and Katrin, who align their social media messaging and also look at nighttime economy when they're open. So last summer they were opening later at certain times of day and watching how they staff. Rod at Mundo's, he likes to see the demographics and the historical information, the pattern, and how it relates to turnover as well. And you got Jackson down at Peter Teepee, busy guy, likes the information, and we've improved on the reporting. We have more graphics, more infographics coming into it as well for his benefit. And Anne Barlow, Crafter's Crutch. We have American Cruises last year, and we made sure that they all loaded the app as they got off the boat in Fishguard. So on the 40-minute journey up, they were looking at the app, and we could get an analytics of all these American cruises. We had about 200 to 300 Americans coming to Cardigan, and they were enticed then as part of the campaign to draw them to the town up to Crafter's Crutch, which is at the far end of town. And that was actively used then, and benefited from that. Geraint then, he has also benefited from using it by looking at how free parking makes a difference. He thinks that it makes people dwell longer, which, you know, it does. And so he thought, yeah, you know, he values the information. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to hand over to Susie Park. So I'll just unshare for now. And if Susie can come in and say a few words.
Yeah, hello there. I'm relatively new as a business to Cardigan High Street. I ran Making in Wales for 3 years previously to actually having a bricks and mortar building. We used to hire venues in Ceredigion, Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire. So coming into Cardigan has been a big move for us. And the analytics that we get from the Wi-Fi helps us to confirm things that we thought, but also to actually inform decisions going forward. So, for example, you know, we've had ups and downs in terms of turnover in the cafe. We run a cafe as well as the craft courses and the little retail shop. And you can look back and actually go, well, okay, it wasn't us on that day. The footfall had gone down because of perhaps a decision made at government level or whatever about you know, people travelling, so that, you know, it confirms maybe suspicions by looking back and going, oh, okay, well, it wasn't so bad after all. And then also looking, as you mentioned, Clive, about crust. You know, if you've got difference of people coming in the evenings into town, wandering around and things, you can then sort of decide whether or not to open, put on an evening menu or events and things like that. So we're finding it extremely useful to back up, you know, decision making.
Thanks, Susie. And Jonathan from Cardigan Castle, if you can come in with your views.
Yeah, thank you, Clive. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so quite similar to Susie, really, I think, in how we use the data. Particularly useful for us as a tourist attraction is that we can sort of drill, or Clive, I suppose, can drill down to find how many of those visitors were actually tourists or how many of them were locals. That differentiation is quite interesting and important to us. And it lets us really measure the effectiveness of what we're offering. You know, year on year, we can now check and see, as a ratio of footfall, how many visitors did we have on that day? Are we trending down year on year in the amount of people coming in? So is what we're offering, you know, maybe getting a bit old, getting a bit stale and needs updating? So that's one side of it. The other side as well is actually to test then anything new that you do put in. So it's good to get that, you know, definitive positive that, you know, you could think it's not worked, but actually it's the footfall in town that's gone down. It's not that you haven't attracted those people through the gates. And then thirdly, what I think is really, really useful, and Clive sort of mentioned it slightly in his presentation there, is to be used as evidence of the value of something to the town. So through the year, the castle runs, you know, a variety of events. Some of them Clive mentioned, then we get involved in different bits and bobs. There can be an element of inconvenience to that sometimes with, you know, possibly road closures but it's really good then after the event to have that definitive evidence, whether it's for going for grant funding or to try and get more people on board to support the event, that it has actually had a positive effect on the town and on the traders.
Thank you, Jonathan. And finally, we've got Ben from Tonne Surf, one of the shops in town as well.
Oh, Clive. Yeah, so for me, I've got a digital marketing and e-commerce background. So I like to get quite granular with the data and look at the analytics just to see how it can benefit me in multiple ways. And one of the things that I like to look at, and Clive's mentioned it, is how we can perhaps compare weather for the day, footfall and sales, and see if there's any correlation on whether my sales have been up or down. And this allows me then to start looking and pre-planning to whether I want to create social campaigns, because as you can see, most month on end, the applications which are being used by the free Wi-Fi are all predominantly social media orientated. So it allows me to create targeted campaigns as well as dynamic campaigns. For the locale, we can look at perhaps my shop has been quiet on these days. Is it rainy? Is it sunny? But do you know what? The people are in town. Are they in cafes? Are they on their mobile phone? The data's there and it shows it. So it allows me to create these discount codes to try and entice them into the shop because I know they're there. And if they're not, then it allows me to kind of strategize against and find other ways you want me to pull them in, whether it's actually creating different graphics and using data from outside the shop just to try and draw them in through more visualized means. But data, we live in a digital world, it's insanely important to me. I need to get as much of it as I can just so I know where I'm spending my money, because it's a very seasonal town at the moment. So I've got to make the most of what I've got.
Okay, thanks, Ben. And I'll just finish off now on my last slide then. Basically, just saying that what next? We tend to have a small town as a bid. It's not possible for us, but we tend to do things by project-based. So I'm always looking for the next project and a pot of money to go with it. Looking further to develop the skills of the town in terms of digital skills. Also looking at big data. We've already mentioned all the stuff we could do, and that town dashboard IoT. That's something I'm really developing at the moment. And one of the things we're looking at as well, and we've gone down the road already, is looking at Cardigan becoming carbon neutral, because we're going to look at smart meters that actually are proper smart meters, not the ones you see on TV, that actually can make full use of energy. So basically, bottom line, making the town more economically strong, engaging, relevant, diverse, adaptive, and more so now for the experiential. So an experience, it's not, it's experience going to a town and to be able to browse and dwell and to purchase. So, and with that, I'll hand back to David.
Diolch yn fawr, Clive. I'll be saying a few words in Welsh now. Felly, da ni'n ffodus iawn o gael Aberteifi. Mae'n esiampl, mae'n template i ardaloedd eraill. Llawer i ddysgu ar sawl lefel gyda nhw. Nesa, fydden ni'n clywed am patrwm. Mae patrwm, dyd i gwir, wedi cael ei datblygu yn sgil gwaith da. Mae Aberteifi wedi arwain arno fo. Da ni wedi gweithio efo Cyngor Gwynedd i ddatblygu patrwm ynghyd â nifer o gynlluniau eraill. Da ni'n weithredu o llygoden ddŵr, hydroponeg, technoleg, a mae'r technoleg digidol yn clymu bob dim at ei gilydd. I gyflwyno patrwm, gen i double act. Gyntaf oll, mae gennym ni Meilir, sef swyddog digidol hefo Menter M-SParc, ac mae Meilir yn gweithio ar ystod y gynlluniau digidol, a hefyd Paul o cwmni Cardigan. Mae gan Paul 30 mlynedd o brofiad o weithio ar cynlluniau technegol, e-fasnach, rhwydweithio, taliadau ar-lein, JS. Ac ar hyn o bryd, mae Paul yn gweithio ar cynlluniau fatha system data, trefnidiaeth gyhoeddus, llwyfan e-fasnach, siopio, ac wrth gwrs patrwm. Felly ar hynny, wrth i ni cael trosglwyddo'r awennau i Meilir i ddechrau y sesiwn yma. Diolch, Meilir.
Diolch yn fawr, David. Just cael. So, good afternoon. I'm Meilir Pritchard. I'm the Digital Officer for Menter M-SParc, who's leading on the town Wi-Fi projects that we run. Since 2018, Menter M-SParc have worked with Gwynedd Council to install public Wi-Fis in towns in Gwynedd. Over the last 2 years, work's been carried out on 8 of the systems, with the last one being launched this year in Bala. And we've now started installing in Anglesey as well. The process that we followed was we worked closely with local experts, town councils and local businesses to identify the suitable towns that have the drive and the ambition to make this project work. Our role was the community engagement, while Paul's company Cardigan led on the technical side. Just looking at the benefits of having a system in place, we're looking at things like mailing lists, so the users that sign up to use the actual Wi-Fi itself, so that they sign up and therefore provide an email address, and providing they agree, we can then send marketing material out to those people until obviously being careful with GDPR rules. In the same way we can target them with advertising every time they log into the system to use the Wi-Fi itself. And obviously, I think Clive's already mentioned this about the dwell time. So we know when people are in our towns, we know how long they're staying and which areas of that town that they are dwelling in. As you can see on here, you've got a picture of access points. This one's installed in Pwllheli. And these boxes can actually be spray painted to the same colour, so they can actually be really disguised and discreet in the towns. So looking at the data, what can be done with it? So as mentioned, the benefits, we can get the data from registered users and marketing, etc. But there's also the presence data that Clive mentioned earlier. And so I'll leave that to Paul just to go through with the patch room system in a bit. So here's a map of Gwynedd and Anglesey, really. So you can see the blue systems on there. They're the ones that we've installed. We've got one red one, which is the Carnarvon Wi-Fi system, which was a pre-existing one, but we've adopted the data from this town, and we'll be adding that to the patch room system quite soon. And then we have 4 orange ones, which are planned ones on Anglesey. And these are going through the process now of identifying local businesses to take part in this project. So I just want to run quickly through the costs for a system. So we're basing this on the Llangefni system, which has 10 access points. So we're looking at hardware costs of about £7,000. Network and portals costs come to 790, and running costs for the first year, which includes support and data collection, etc., are 3,430. So the total for the installation and running for first year is £11,227 plus VAT. And then the additional year running costs looking at £3,180 plus VAT. Now, obviously, these figures will be dependent on the size of the actual system that's installed. So once the Wi-Fi has been installed and we've upgraded with present software to collect data on the footfall, the second phase of this project was using that data collected. So Paul, can I hand over to you now to run us through the patch room software?
Yes, you can. Okay, hope everyone can hear me. Right, I'll switch to share the screen and be the one who somehow was chosen to do a live demo. Right, so patch room, a quick run through what it is. It's something that we saw a need for early on in setting up the community Wi-Fi networks, in the sense that even though the data is unquestionably valuable, there is a set of costs that have to be paid for, and unfortunately the budgets that we had initially couldn't cover for some of the unsurprisingly valuable data sets that the systems were capturing. So in partnership with the company that provides the hardware, we did some research and we presented back to Menter M-SParc that we could actually present this data without the fees. So what we've designed here, using cloud technologies, open source cloud technologies, is a data collection platform for multiple networks. So you can see here from the screen that it's covering the live networks that we've got at the moment. If you wanted to click on Beddgelert, we can now see on the map the various access points, just to give indications of the number of sensors. This is the home page of Patch room, where all networks in Gwynedd are shown, and this is the dwell time graphs for the different towns. Bala came on later, so it doesn't have quite the distance and data, and you can see straight away, as Clive's indicated there, the roll up to the summer holidays and all the way through to the peak of the bank holiday. I can confirm that this date here, the 25th, I was actually a tourist in Beddgelert, all of 12 miles away, and the heavens opened, which just comes again, shows the impact of weather. So yeah, here are the different towns. There are already ways of classifying towns, and we're trying within the data model in Patch room to reflect standards that are already in place. And unsurprisingly, the different types of towns that we have in Gwynedd actually do match some of the characteristics of those town types, whether they're speciality towns or holiday towns, etc. So you can see in Pwllheli and Porthmadog, there are actually quite distinct differences across usage over the last 3 months. If we were to go yet again live into Beddgelert and look in more detail, we've now got heat maps that are showing areas of activity within the town, within the village. And we've got the dwell times in more detail, so we can see that yesterday, for instance, the first week at the end of September, the fall down has been quite substantial. The number of visitors, so this breaks it down just in terms of the actual number of people who visited a town rather than the dwell time. This is all visible to people. The system is open source and bilingual, so we can change the language to reflect. That's now the other things that we're dealing with. You can see, I think if I go here, this is the other data that we're capturing that we are now working on bringing into Patrum itself as part of the data model, rather than it sitting in a third-party system that fees have to be paid for. And this gives some more of the breakdown in terms of information about users. As Clive pointed out, the information I was just showing you then was just showing the number of devices. Although it's nice to equate people with devices or not, we know very little more. We can tell whether they're an Apple or an Android, etc. But the value of that's quite questionable, unless you're a geek. This is now giving us information on gender, age groups during that period. There's matching information there in terms of hours of the day, how people are logging in, and of course the timed logout told you about a live demo. One of the other things that we think is important to point out as well is that the whole, it's being brought up again by one of the businesses in Aberteifi, is granularity. So for us, it was important to flood town centres with access points. So here's Porthmadog, again, population of around 4,000. And we have placed 11 access points in there in order to start to give us more detailed information about where people are and to provide an ongoing experience, so they can use the system throughout their visit. And finally, now we're bringing in, if I just bring this through, we're bringing in the actual data from the IoT sensors. So we're using at this point a German system, open source again, Luftdaten, and it's the first Daten has been able to model air quality data. What this has involved is quite a different data stream to access points. It's quite volatile, it's quite dynamic. So we're putting quite a bit of work into that so that we can then start to use information in terms of, if we know people have been in the town for less than 5 minutes, can we assume that they're driving through? Can we then model this against the information that we're getting deriving from IoT sensors? We're also in close discussions with Cofnod Gwynedd, and we hope other councils in terms of how we can bring in sensors that bring through things that service delivery chiefs are interested in, like bins, parking, etc., so that people can start to model this. At the end of the day, this data is going to be open. It's going to be granular enough in terms of being able to have the concept of a sales funnel, which is, from our e-commerce experience, what we believe towns require. I think that's probably it. So, David?
Diolch yn fawr, Paul. Mae gymaint o bethau fan hyn. Mae'n biti fe ddim yn cael 3-4 awr ar hyn, ond dyna fo, awr sgynnon ni all awr a chwarter. Gai just cyfeirio at y hashtags. Da chi ar Twitter, mae croeso chi nodi rhywbeth yna'n hashtag Smart Towns, Trefi Clyfar, a hefyd mae yna hashtag arall, a dwi'n cofio beth yw hwnnw o ran, Transforming Towns neu Trawsnewid Trefi. So dyna y hashtags ar gyfer y digwyddiad. Hefyd, os gennych chi gwestiynau, rhowch nhw lawr yn y chat, a gawn ni ddod nôl hynna yn y Q&A. Mae lawer o waith da'n digwydd yn Patrum. Mae Patrum wedi digwydd yn rhannol herwydd Aberteifi. Yr her rwan wedi cael pobl yn y Trefi, nad dwi'n swydd o pobl yma o Ben y Groes a Bala i ddefnyddio'r data yna. Dyna di'r challenge nesaf. Oedd Paul yn sôn am Lor o Wan, byddwn ni hefyd yn edrych ar gynnal semina tebyg i hwn, ond ar sensoryddion mewn trefi a pentrefi yn gymryd hefyd. Felly ar hynny, sy'n licio trosglwyddo ar y wenna wan i Aled, sy'n reolwr ar Telemat, sef adran IT o fewn Antur Cymru. Yn ogystal â darparu cefnogaeth IT, mae Telemat wedi gosod 20 y systemau Wi-Fi ar draws Cymru. Ac ni'n siŵr bod Aled wedi dod ar draws sawl her a wedi datrys nhw hefyd. Felly o'n i am ofyn i Aled sôn am y gwaith yna. So, Aled, over to you.
Diolch yn fawr. Right. Sharing on screen. Okay, so yeah, diolch yn fawr, David, thank you very much. Good afternoon, thanks for inviting me to speak at this event. I wanted to talk to you today about our experience of installing town Wi-Fi systems over the past 5 or 6 years, how the process has evolved over that period because of what we learned, and the problems we've encountered and how these schemes might evolve further in the future. You might already be aware that we were involved in the first scheme in Wales, which provided free town Wi-Fi coupled with data analytics and marketing capabilities, just like the scheme installed in Cardigan. And that first scheme was in Llandrindod, Wales, back in 2015. It was a reasonably easy one to get started with. It was part of a larger scheme with the rebranding of the town and a new town website to go alongside it. And the other benefit was it had an employed town champion to liaise with the local businesses and link all those 3 schemes together. The next scheme we were involved in was to install Wi-Fi in 10 towns across Pembrokeshire. Part of that tender was for us to identify businesses that would be able to host access points and for us to approach them individually to get them to agree. I think we pretty quickly realised that that wasn't going to work and the installation phase stalled because of it. It wasn't until we started to engage with the town councils or the chambers of trade in each town and got them to have those discussions with the various businesses that we got the buy-in on a local level and we were able to complete the installations. That buy-in at that local level is really a critical part of the success of these schemes. We faced a similar issue when it came to the data and the marketing. The data gathered from the systems can be made available to anyone who wants it, whereas because of the nature of the marketing information we gather and GDPR, this data is best managed by a central person or a group, a town council, for example. And that can lead to a sort of a protectionism around that data and an unwillingness to share that data between everybody. Again, it quickly became apparent that despite the training we gave as part of the tender, the information available wasn't being accessed on a regular basis and that very little marketing material was being sent out. The reason seemed to be that the business owners weren't able to or didn't have time to interrogate the data and draw their own conclusions from it. At the same time, the town councils, and you have to remember that these are mostly either volunteer or at best part-time roles, didn't have time to collate information like advertising information on events and put it together to send out to everyone on the mailing list in a managed way. So we developed some more training for each town, which helped the situation, but it didn't really get us up to the levels that we were hoping for. So that led us to evolve the offering significantly for our next project. That was for a scheme in Carmarthenshire, again for multiple towns, but the scope of this project this time allowed us to put more of a focus on helping the towns and individual businesses analyse and use the data and information gathered and to send marketing material to them. So that was done by including a part-time project manager as part of the scheme, and who in turn managed 2 digital apprentices for the 2-year period of that project. So as well as coordinate the standard weekly and monthly reports for each town, they are able to provide training to town councils and individual businesses, provide bespoke reports when required, compare data from one town to another, or from a particular date compared to the equivalent date last year, collate, prepare and send out marketing material to mailing lists as required, and plenty of other useful things as well. Carmarthenshire are quite lucky in that just like Cardigan have Clive to do a lot of this work for them. There are individuals in some of those towns that do similar work, but having the apprentices on board meant that every town was able to take advantage of that data and marketing opportunities made available through the Wi-Fi scheme. So what does the future look for schemes like this? Well, it's clear to us that as well as installing the hardware and maintaining it, there's also a requirement to fully support the towns through the whole process, which is why in the future we'll be giving towns the option of drawing down time from our data and marketing specialist as part of any project to ensure that they're getting full value from their scheme. This can be either be part of a new scheme or as an add-on to any existing project, and can be used to help town councils or individual businesses. What we'd like to see happen is a scenario where the schemes become so successful that advertising space can be purchased on either the splash page prior to gaining access to the Wi-Fi, or on welcome emails or newsletters, which could lead to the schemes becoming self-funding in the future. But further than that, there's an opportunity here for all of us, solution providers, towns, county councils, Welsh Government, to use the information we have and share it with each other to give a better overall picture of what's happening in Wales, and use that data to drive policy at a national level and activity at a local level. We could use the data from different parts of the country for benchmarking to better understand traffic flow from one area to another, and a huge range of other uses as well. I think Lee Waters mentioned earlier that we don't necessarily know what we can use the data for yet, and that's exactly right. But the critical part is that we collect the data so that we do have it when we need it. And whatever those uses might be, working collaboratively will ensure that the data we hold shows its full worth and provides full value and opportunity to everyone involved. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Aled. Thank you, Aled. Yes, I think it's the point there is that this data is valuable whether you're a surf shop in Cardigan or you're the Welsh Government. It's equally accessible, or should be equally as accessible. Our next speaker is Clive Hall. Now, Clive Hall is the Chief Executive of the Place Dashboard, which provides behaviour analytics for place managers and understand how people use locations. So Clive is going to introduce the Place Dashboard software, and which can provide real-time data without building infrastructure. So be interested to hear what you have to say, Clive. Over to you.
David. Right, I'm just going to start sharing my screen first of all. Okay, so we're slightly different. We're actually using GPS data as opposed to Wi-Fi systems. It's an alternative and not necessarily replacement here. We've used GPS for about 4 years now, and we've now started combining it with machine learning and artificial intelligence to actually calculate footfall for about 1,980 town centres across the UK on a weekly and monthly basis. How we've been able to achieve that is we have a panel or a sample of 1.6 million unique phones. They're actually providing 1 billion GPS location data points every month. And we are able to capture them from 40 plus unique GDPR compliant apps. And those apps range from very small photography apps right through to train booking or car navigation. But the crucial thing is that we only take data that gives us 30 GPS points a day, and that enables us to actually understand real behavior patterns and start to apply the machine learning and artificial intelligence to actually extrapolate up to get true footfall volumes and behaviour types within town centres. So what are the benefits then of this approach compared to maybe Wi-Fi or traditional footfall cameras? One of the things which is an immediate is there is no hardware required. So we do currently have footfall data for just under 100 town centres across Wales. We can measure across everywhere. There's no restrictions. You don't need to focus on a particular street, or so we can actually include car parks, we can include green spaces, and which I'll show you in a demo in a short while, we can actually include places that are private, such as shopping centres or outlet parks, retail parks, or even supermarkets. We track visitors then not just at street level, but actually at core category levels. So we can get down to businesses, individual businesses. And one of the big demands we always have is how people use a town centre, independents versus national businesses, for example. We can understand why they use that town centre. an example here, there's 35% of all visits revolve a grocery shop. And then we can also, which is one of the big things in driving footfall, we can really understand where people are coming from. We can get that down to postcode level, and we have examples of town centres where they actually locate their social media marketing against the postcode data we're able to provide to them. And once again, I'll show you that in a short demo. And then finally, it's easy to be able to compare your neighbouring towns, any town in Wales, or literally any town in the UK using these data sets. So where we currently are, we have 103 towns. This is showing on the map where we're actually capturing or calculating data. There is no restriction. We could add another 100 places onto that map if we wished. So we can literally measure footfall wherever people go. And so I'm just going to come out of this screen now and actually move over to the dashboard itself. So what we have here then is we bring all this data together, and there's been a few comments about how to use the data. So we've tried to work really hard on use cases for actual GPS behaviour and footfall data. This is the map. You can select any location and you just add them into your tray over here. I've actually added Swansea, Bridgend and Cardiff into my tray. So all my analytics now will actually be based around those 3 locations. But if I wanted to add in Aberystwyth, I can do that very easily. I'll just click on there, add it in, and it will appear in my tray. The next part then is the analytics itself, which is obviously the crucial value of these platforms. So what we're able to do is actually bring in real calculated footfall. These are footfall volumes. Without going into the detail of how it's done, they are extrapolated. So it's not simply saying there's 700 people in the town centre, we're actually bringing it up into real footfall volume sizes. This is monthly. So because we've got these 3 locations here, we can compare across the 3. Equally though, we can start to do some trend analysis. We're starting back at the middle of lockdown here, and you can see the growth. And on this one, you can actually see the growth coming through, which is Cardiff, 403% growth from May. Whereas if we go into Swansea, it's 186. So actually we can clearly see city centre growth has dramatically outstripped Swansea's growth within this. And you can choose any location you wish to compare against. We also then have trend on week and see what's been happening. So let's just go into the trend line. Once again, we can see that all places from May, or from June in this one, have been growing month on month. And you just highlight over the top and see how things are going week on week as we go through lockdown. Another interesting part is this data set here. So this is actually starting to bring some where people come from. So we are able to actually identify which postcode location they come from. And also, because we've chosen Swansea, Bridgend and Cardiff, we can see what percentage of that postcode area, SA1 here, are actually using each town centre. Really crucial information for marketing events, actually recruiting new businesses into town, and also being able to track your own success at converting people to come into the town centre. If we just go back over to here, and I'm just going to come out of that and go into maps, it's much easier to understand then where people are coming from. So here we have Swansea, Bridgend and Cardiff. I just take off Bridgend and Cardiff. It's really interesting. That is Swansea's top 10 postcode catchment. All the percentage conversions, the volumes of visitors coming, and the actual population for each postcode. When we add on Bridgend, now this is top 10 I might want to add, we do have all the data for every single postcode we've seen coming into Swansea. And the new feature that we're adding will be what we're calling tourism. But let's just add Bridgend on. You see here, there is no crossover of the top 10 postcodes between the 2 places. In postcode top 10s, they are mutually exclusive. And that's really important, say for Bridgend or Swansea, when attracting new businesses in. If you want to attract this audience, you need to be in Swansea. If you're attracting these postcodes, you need to be in Bridgend. And really bizarrely, and this was completely random, when we looked at Cardiff's top 10, they also didn't overlap. There is a caveat with this. This is only the top 10. A place like Cardiff actually, during August, had people from over 500 postcodes in the city centre. We do have all of that data, and we will be adding it into these dashboards to help people. If we go across into analytics again, let's just then start to look at some of the people and where this can add value to you as a business. So here we can see by time of day. Now, one of the things many town centres want to really look at is their evening economy. Let's just take out Bridgend and just look at Swansea and Cardiff. It's quite interesting how Cardiff as a city centre, and this is August data 20, had 20,000 unique visits at the time of 7 o'clock. But Swansea wasn't that far behind. Now, the footfall for Cardiff is much greater than Swansea. If we go back into here, we can see here that actual Cardiff's footfall was 711,000 and Swansea just 575. That's just one example of way of looking at this and going, actually, Swansea has a fantastic even economy, even during lockdown. And it's something that actually the town centre should really shout about. Back into visitors, for independent businesses or even national businesses, once again, you can, let's just focus on Swansea. That is the portfolio of when people are coming through, really busy right up to 1 o'clock. So yeah, staffing, we need there. And obviously we would then be able to do the same for days. At the moment, during August, pretty similar day profiles. But then down here, this is a bit about marketing again. You can see here there's a drop down. I can go in and just look at the volume of brief visitors. So on this one, we've got about 15,685 visits, which are brief, 6 to 12 minutes. What you should be able to do then is start to work out campaigns and interventions to get those people, that volume of visitors, to stay longer. You can track that very easily by simply changing your time frame here. So you can easily and quickly identify whether your activities to make people stay longer are actually working. So that's a bit about people. Let's just move on into streets. So what we've got going on this part of this is actually Swansea Town Centre. Now, you've seen a few other heat maps going on. What we're able to do here, though, is actually start to look at the heat and actually create it into real footfall volumes. So Park Tor Retail Park, if I just click on it, it will highlight it. That is the busiest part of Swansea. If I then just go, another advantage here is that we've actually got Tesco. We can actually highlight Tesco very easily and just put the shape around it. And I've got Sainsbury's. Quite often, those types of locations are excluded from the normal ways of counting footfall because they won't allow you on their premises. And finally, just highlighting, we've got the shopping centre as well. So we've actually got the 4 core areas of where people are actually visiting. And then when we come to the 5th one, it's actually a street within the city centre. It's Wynn Street. Now, Wynn Street, if I just go into July, here and look at the data, where is Wynn Street? It's down at 8th, all the way down there, 19,000. Let's just go back into August and look at Wynn Street again, 47,594. Wow, what's going on there? Well, I can tell you what's going on there, because if I go into local provision, I can actually see down here all of the businesses that are actually in Swansea. And if I go into Wynn Street, I can show you those are the businesses on Wynn Street. That's what type they are. They're all food establishments. What happened in August? We had Help Out to Eat Out. So we can clearly prove that actually an activity is not only driven footfall at the total town level, but we can very quickly go in and identify by street what an impact has been. Now, if you were then wanting to say, well, that's quite interesting. Well, I wonder how that compared to Bridgend. We just change Bridgend. And there we go. We have all of the same data for that town centre, all of those streets ranked on the heat map. And once again, we can go back in history and pull that out. And then finally, on here, this is about attracting businesses in. We can go in and look at the national provision for Swansea and say, right, okay, this is all the Swansea businesses. Well, I wonder how we just compare to Bridgend. Let's have a look at that. So now we've got Bridgend's data in. If we just scroll across, we can start to identify our strengths versus other locations. So this is Bridgend's and this is Swansea. So Swansea has a stronger offering in national clothing brands. Why wouldn't Swansea want to be shouting about that to get more people to come into Swansea regarding clothing? If we then added into Cardiff, we would then be able to go, well, actually, now Cardiff's added in, sorry, let's move over here, they've got 61. So to be honest, there's not much point trying to compete for Cardiff Town Centre audience. If you remember, we know where the Cardiff Town Centre audience is because we've got the catchment map, and we've also got what Cardiff can offer. Swansea's not going to be able to be as successful, but we do know Swansea has a fantastic dining. So maybe you would start your first campaign around dining. Then, if you're actually thinking about bringing in new businesses, we can look here and say, well, okay, let's just type in clothing. These are all the national brands available. And let's say, just go down here and say, pick on Burton's Menswear. They're in 3 locations in both of the cities. For a certain town, Burton's Menswear may be considering of closing. You now have all the evidence to prove to them that they shouldn't close maybe the Bridge End store. Equally so, we could go down to Fat Face and say, well, you're only in Cardiff. Why aren't you coming to Swansea or Bridge End? The audiences are there and they're not shared because we've got the evidence to prove that on the maps. And then finally on here, if we just go back over to local provision, you can start to see what the splits are there. And one of the things that we are starting to add, and I think we've got it in national provision already. If I scroll down, is actually what are the volumes by category? Why are people using Swansea? And if I just scroll across, you'll be able to see 14,000 visits are within the category of grocery, Tesco and Sainsbury's. Actually, we probably already knew that because we'd looked at the heat map, but you can start to identify very easily why people are using your location. And once again, do interventions to start targeting different categories, as well as using your street data just to combine the use of the town centre with actually the location. So I was being very positive on this map, showing you where the heat spots were. Well, let's look at the negatives. Park Street, Picton Lane, Singleton Street. I can find out what businesses are on there by looking at local provision. I can understand the category visits to the town centre, and I can also very quickly understand where people are not going. So hopefully that gives you a feel for what you can really do with GPS data now. And just to wrap up on that, just go back to the map and saying, currently, every dot on this map is actually having footfall behaviour data calculated for it every single minute of the day. And there is no constraint. So if you are a local authority, you can add in all of your towns that you cover, add them onto the map, and you can actually start to pull in the behaviour data. So let's just stop my share. And hopefully that is giving you a good feel of how GPS data can really help towns understand where people are coming from, how often they're visiting, and why they're visiting. My last thing is, if you go to our website, towncentre.ai, all towns, we can actually have a 30-day free pilot of the data, so you can nip in, see your own town centre, and have a delve around the data, and that license will be there for 30 days for you.
Thank you very much, Clive. Certainly very analytical. So you lived up to your bio there with that presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before I hand over to the Minister for Housing and Local Government, just a few messages to finish with. First of all, hopefully you've seen a lot of information here. It's a lot to take in, but the tech is relatively easy. But it's the humans we need to convince and develop their skills to use and utilize that technology. Capturing the data is fairly easy, but harvesting, assessing it, sharing it, analysing it, that's another key element. And we need more Clives around Wales to do that within the town. In terms of following up on this, hopefully this has started a conversation around smart towns, and there will be a follow-up seminars around or webinars around using sensors in towns, be it for bins or drains or people hanging around skate parks when they shouldn't be. There is a conversation to be had around that as well. So on that, we'll open up the Q&As. I've got a number of questions here and I'll get the members of the panel to contribute. But I was going to ask Hannah Blythen to contribute, but I'm not sure if she's...
I am here. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. My my chat function was on top of your face. Sorry. So yes, so hopefully you've learned quite a bit in the last hour or so, and I'd like to invite you to reflect on what you've learned. Thank you.
Diolch, David. Thank you. Can I just firstly start by thanking you for hosting, Menter M-SParc for hosting this event today. I think, you know, the popularity of it demonstrates how important we all recognise the digital agenda is for our towns and all of us that are involved and invested in ensuring that success into the future. I must apologise for only being able to join you just under halfway through. And one of the things I quickly learnt when I became a member of the Senedd, and that was magnified even more when I became a minister, was that I actually need a time machine to get everywhere that I need to be on time. And I'm now learning that still applies even when you're working virtually from the comfort of your own home. But absolutely, as what I did here and what I have learned is, you know, credible, you know, it's eye-opening, lots of learning points there for us. And I think, you know, what I've heard too is that the idea of that, you know, the things that we can do with digital and data were not entirely clear yet, but actually having that information could open the door to huge opportunities for our towns in Wales, not just in terms of, I think it was Aled said, shaping the agenda on the ground, but shaping the agenda of government as well. And as part of the work we're leading on our transforming towns within Welsh Government, smart towns, digital towns, dialing up the digital offer and actually how we operate has to be central to that as we move forward. We had a debate, or we had a statement in the chamber earlier this week, and you know, that's something that came up time and time again from members and from myself in terms of actually, you know, the digital offer and the opportunities that data and digital can give us in terms of actually how we not just drive footfall but kind of develop our towns as we move forward. I was particularly, you know, looking at the end there from that presentation from Clive, actually how you can, you know, how you can look at who, you know, the postcodes for people that go into particular city or town centres, you know, the sort of information if you're thinking about getting buy-in at a local level, and there's opportunities there if we work, you know, we work closely with local authorities, but I'm also keen to work closely with those partners that, you know, buying on the ground, the community engagement is so important as well if we're going to make this success. And the role for town and community councils and business forums, bids, all those kind of groups that work at a grassroots level within our communities right across Wales. You know, I'm certainly quite excited and inspired by what I've been able to see today, and I really very much look forward to working with you as we take this agenda forward in Wales, working with my colleague Lee Waters and also as part of the Transforming Towns initiative. Just one final point to leave you with is that we have set up a Ministerial Town Centre action group, and I've been keen to stress the emphasis is on the action. It's not just for discussion and debate, it's actually to drive things forward and actually create change in our town centres across Wales. And two of the very, you know, key focuses of that group at the moment is actually looking at definitely digital and data is going to be one on the agenda of one of the future groups, and also how we kind of empower the community to get involved with that. So thank you once again, and I very do much look forward to working with you on this agenda to really make a difference and have data and digital at the heart of that.
Thank you very much, Minister. Your presence and that of Lee Waters is very appreciated today. Hopefully it demonstrates the commitment from Welsh Government for this important subject. Before we move on to the Q&As, I'd just like to make a few thanks. First to Peter Williams, Darlene Maudsley and Matthew Perryman for their support in organising this, and also to my colleagues Sarah Loyce and Emily from the Enterprise Hub in pulling this all together. Now, we're now moving on to the more informal section of it, the Q&A. But before I do that, we have another person that's on the call, Sharon Richardson. Now, she wasn't a speaker today, but hopefully she'll be a speaker in the future, because Sharon Richardson works for Join the Dots. She has a PhD in social spatial data science and an MSc in smart cities and urban analytics. So I may ask Sharon, can I ask you to say a few words initially before I open the floor on what you've heard today?
Yeah, no, thanks so much for inviting me in to join the sessions today. They've been really, really interesting to listen to. I just was going to summarise, you know, the whole use of sense data and its impact on how we understand pedestrian movements and town and urban social landscapes. And if you really think about it, you know, much of pedestrian and neighbourhood modelling historically has relied on theory, you know, theoretical assumptions about how we behave in different environments. And real-world observations often show us that a lot of those assumptions can be very wrong. You know, they're too general often, and they just fail to represent that reality at a local level. What we're seeing now with sense data is that ability, and we've seen it today in developing data-driven models that can help us to learn what I like to call the social heartbeat of a given landscape, you know, how its rhythm varies from day to night, from week to weekend, and how it can be disrupted too, both very quickly, just temporary for special events, but potentially longer lasting effects, such as what we're seeing with COVID, or not. You know, and as we've seen in some of the presentations, COVID's not impacting places uniformly. You know, some places are impacted very, very differently to others. Some are benefiting even from COVID, whilst others are in terrible situations. And so for me, the real unique benefit of having sense data is that ability for us now to frequently or can even continuously sample reality, what's going on in the real world at street level, and then we can recalibrate our models to reflect and respond both to current behaviours and how behaviour is changing over time. And it does, you know, it's not something we can measure once and then use that as an algorithm for the next 10, 15, 20 years. It's simply not going to work in our modern lives. But, and there has to be a but, you know, I have to be a little bit of the devil's advocate here. You know, it is worth remembering that sense data cannot tell us absolutely everything. You know, depending on the source, there is often some form of underlying bias in the data, particularly if we use mobile apps that often have a demographic skew. But there's another aspect too, in that if we rely only on observed data, it risks reinforcing existing biases in the design of our environments, you know, in design of urban space. It doesn't tell us the activities that don't happen because they're deterred by the current environment or they're missed opportunities. So that's something to always bear in mind. Sense data, it's fantastic in that it's actually quite a low-cost method that can provide very rich insights to inform decisions. But we can also be using it to prompt deeper questions, potentially developing new theories of behaviour and then pushing for further research to improve our urban planning and design.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And I promise next time you'll be top of the bill.
Thank you.
But you are right, it's only part of the answer, and it's the human element is also so important. We have a few questions here, and I will direct these to the people I think are most capable of answering them. The first one for you, Clive. What sort of revenue do you need to run a Cardigan system per year?
It's roughly, well, the town council covers the majority of the cost. In terms of the app that we use, that's 1,200 per annum for the hosting. And that is also got contributions from the town itself. The shops contribute towards that. So it's like a subscription in a way. And then the Wi-Fi scheme annually depends on the licensing for the scheme. So we bought initially, I think it was 3 or 5 year license. So it's coming up to a renewal next year, and we're going to pay for that. So that'll be in the budget. So at the moment, I think it's about 2,000 to 3,000. I think it is to renew it then per annum. So those are the kind of costings. But we can plan ahead with a budget on that. But things will change hopefully in terms of the local authority level. With developments that we're doing in Cardigan overall anyway, with licensing and possibly looking at new tech with IoT, which will be cheaper. So it's never standing still, the tech. The information is the key thing.
But it's right to say in Cardigan, the benefit is obvious. The financial benefit is obvious for you and the businesses in the town. Yes.
So the initial cost was paid for by a European Union grant. So you know, that was a major cut to get it installed and getting the initial equipment installed and the licensing. So it's only the ongoing costs and the licensing now to cover.
Thank you. A question for you, Paul. Paul, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you.
So I'm aware that a number of you could provide different answers for these, but I will stick to one per question. So what knowledge, expertise is needed at Mission Control to manage the system? How many people do you need to run it?
There is no Mission Control. There's no Dominic Cummings anywhere near us. There's very little required to run it. The costs that we've incurred over the last 3 to 6 months have entirely been in developing and evolving a data model that can provide reliable data from multiple different sources. Other than that, the cost of maintenance is probably, from a technical perspective, 3-4 hours a month. It all sits up there in AWS. There's no license fees at all because we're not using just normal databases. We're using data messaging and time series databases, which keep the costs of hosting what in essence will be a very large amount of data, we hope, as we bring more networks in. So there is no mission control. It's there, it's live, and 3 hours a week. What we do with it and how we then extract data out to do exactly as Clive and his team and his colleagues have done in Cardigan, to look at how interventions work, or the things that really excite us, which is when you have several towns and it's open data, you can start to do what we did in e-commerce, which is A/B testing. So you can pick 2 similar towns that want to look at interventions, and you can then look at how that works. And interventions doesn't just mean pedestrianisation, it could be promotions, there's all sorts of things there. The people who work in the high streets and coordinate the high streets are the experts. So we just support them. Very little time. There is no mission control.
Introduce myself. Clive, I'm aware that you would give different answers to these questions. The third question for you, Clive Hall now. Can you capture data from phones who have not registered for Wi-Fi and map their journey through the town?
Yeah, our data doesn't integrate with any Wi-Fi systems whatsoever. It's all driven by the people's phones. So we currently have about 1.6 million of those phones. And wherever those phones go on a daily basis, we capture the data. So it isn't hardware connected and it's not location connected, it's people connected. So if a phone moves, we will get the data from that phone. The reason why we get that is because they'll have an app on their phone which is delivering or publishing out GPS data, and that's all GDPR compliant with all the apps that we use. So it's, as I say, it's not hardware or Wi-Fi connected.
Okay, thank you, Clive. A question for you, Meilir. Are there max or minimum size of towns that can use this initiative?
Not really. Obviously, cost is the biggest issue with it, and depending on your town, you could have 2 access points, you could have 200. It doesn't really matter. It's just depending on the size of the town and how many access points you need to cover that town. Size technically isn't an issue for it.
Thank you, Meilir. And we have, I think, one last question. And maybe Sharon, I'll come to you for this. How do we encourage towns within a region to use the data collaboratively rather than just compete with each other for visitor numbers?
Crikey, that's a good question. There is always that danger, because all towns are often under pressure, budgetary wise. So, they're looking to attract people to their town. So it's really, I suppose, if we go back to that last demonstration, ideally it's finding complementary values within each town. What we don't know is, in a sort of post-COVID world, how much that is going to impact people's willingness to travel to different locations. A lot of what would have previously been considered the weekly shop or the weekly visit to shopping centres might not happen going forward in that same way. It might become much more of a social activity. And I know absolutely in many examples, you can argue the Saturday shop is a social activity, always was, but I think it become much more social. And so there you might find people choosing to visit at different locations closer to where different people live. So that's something we don't know yet, is that we could actually see a fundamental change in the reasons and the duration of visits into towns, particularly for the leisure type activities. There's a separate category, obviously, in terms of the impact to offices. If we have much more flexi working, I was using mobile app data and Wi-Fi data to monitor movements within London and sampling it over 2 years. And we saw a clear seasonal shift where we were seeing declining visits on Mondays and Fridays. And that was really reflecting an increase in flexible working, but much more pronounced in the winter than the summer. Actually, in the summer, we saw higher durations on Thursday evenings, Friday evenings, clustered around bars and restaurants close to transport hubs, which is quite interesting. So really the benefit here is using the data going forward, but it's not an easy one to answer in terms of getting that collaboration between towns, because we are on quite new ground in terms of social behaviour. So the benefits are to facilitate the ease of visiting the different towns and the different attractions that they're going to offer.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, I agree. Quite often we don't have the answers, but we can ask the questions now, and it does make you inquisitive. I've been looking at the Patron data the last 6 weeks and asking, why is that like that? And then you ask your friends who live in Blaenau-Ffestiniog or Llanfestiniog. And it just encourages you to be inquisitive and ask questions, which is in itself a good thing. Even if you don't know the answer, I think it's good. Okay, so those are the questions. I think that's it for this webinar. So thank you for everybody that's contributed, everybody that's sat in and listened, and especially to the speakers from the businesses in Cardigan who have businesses to run, as well as contributing to this webinar. So thank you especially Susie, Jonathan, Ben, for your contribution, as well as everybody else. So thank you very much, Minister, for joining us, both Ministers for joining us, and hopefully we'll have a follow-up in the not too distant future. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd. Thank you very much.